Hello and welcome to Level Up Your Talents Abroad, a series of inspiring interviews of expats where we uncover through their stories what talents they have developed. We are exploring the behind the scene because too often we only see the end result of an expatriation, but we miss out on the process, what it really takes to get where they are today. So they will share with us the up and the downs, the bold decisions, their challenges, and what they learned on the way. It's been like 20 years that I'm living abroad, and I've never met an expat who told me it was easy. If you keep the big picture of that experience, the move itself is such a tiny part, right? What's important is what comes after. And that very often we are not well prepared for that. And we go through a big emotional roller coaster. So if you want to get better equipped for this journey abroad, visit the website Expat Coaching Corner. I design an online program with on-demand videos, super flexible, just for you to equip you better for this ride. So the link is in the description. I'm your host, 𝗂'𝘃𝗍. Now let's dive in. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming Emily. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Anne. Hi, everyone.
We are thrilled to have you here today with us. And thank you for sharing your story and exploring what it really takes to level up your talents abroad. So today we are going to Canada. To give some context to our listeners, can you please tell us what are you doing today? Why did you decide to move abroad?
Okay, sure. So I first moved to Canada. I actually first moved to Toronto as part of the exchange program from school. So I studied in Rouen, and before I graduated, we had the opportunity to go to 1 semester abroad. I picked Toronto, moved for about 4 to 6 months to Toronto in 2000. Loved my experience at the University of Toronto, decided I wanted to come back. So when I finished my studies in France, I had this plan that I would eventually try to live in Canada for a few years. I applied for work permit, which at the time was a permanent residency. So I applied for a permanent resident status. And when I got it, about after 2, 3 years of working in France, I decided to take the leap and move. So that would have been 2005. I moved to Toronto, essentially with 2 suitcases, and decided to start fresh on the other side of the ocean. The idea was that when I graduated, there weren't a lot of expat opportunities available. And I thought, well, if I can't find one, I'll just do it with more of a local status. So that was kind of how I moved to Toronto. I started working in retail, selling French newspapers and then French croissants, because that's what people expect you to do when you're from France. There's a lot of about having a first Canadian experience. So you need to kind of get that first Canadian experience to be eligible on the job market for quote unquote a real job. So I did that for a few months, and then I found my first real job. Worked in Toronto for a few years, and then moved to Montreal in 2018. So it's been a bit of a journey, but it's been a few years now.
Yeah, it definitely has been a few years, but it was really courageous to say, okay, now time to go and take off with your 2 suitcases. So how did that happen? You just decide, okay, I'm going, I have my visa. Did you find an apartment? How did you find everything? Like your
Yeah, so
steps when you left, your first steps. Can you tell us more about it?
yeah, so because I studied in Toronto, I had friends that I kept from that time in Toronto that I kept in touch with. So initially when I moved with my 2 suitcases, I stayed with a friend for a few weeks. Then I rented an apartment that I remember he had to be a guarantee on because I had no history of credit in the country. And when you have no banking history, you're nobody. Then I opened a first credit card where I had to deposit money. So it wasn't really a credit card, it was more a debit account. So you put $3,000 and you can spend $3,000. And then little things like that, that you have to like create a footprint in the country that you're in so that people know that you're here. Then you go through the steps of getting a social insurance number. You go through your first taxes declaration, and you learn a lot through the process. It's a bit of a learning curve in the beginning. And then when you move to a different province, it's a whole other story. Again, it's like starting anew because Canada is very different from province to province. But it's all these little learnings you kind of learn as you go. You ask around and people tell you, oh, this is how you do it.
Okay, so yeah, that was my question, like because you sounds like you handle everything by yourself. But do you have like kind of support? What kind of support do you have like for the administration part?
So for the logistics part, I had my friends that helped me kind of navigate, the job market and the rental market, things like that. For work in Canada, there are a lot of resources for immigrants because they have a lot of immigrants. So I had someone coach me on how to do a Canadian resume, for example. From a financial standpoint and medical standpoint, you're pretty much left to your own devices. So it's for you to figure out. So
Okay.
there isn't like one central resource where you can say, hey, I'm new, help me navigate this country. That
Yeah.
there is some effort to be put in to find the right resources. You can find them, they exist, but it's not a welcome package.
Yes. So you pretty much have to figure things out by yourself
You do.
tap find what who can help.
Which, yeah, exactly.
Oh,
There's a little bit of research to be done, and it takes time and effort, but people are happy to help when you find the right people.
yes. Yeah. I mean, for me, it was the same thing when I was in Shanghai. They always, I mean, people were super nice and willing to help because, I mean, I couldn't read any Chinese. So definitely you need help. Um, Quick question. Is it the same thing as the US with a credit score where you need to have like this trust level
Yes.
for doing like for anything, basically?
Pretty much. I don't know how it is in the US. I know how it is here, but here you have a credit score,
Mm.
and that opens a lot of doors. And if you don't have it, it closes a lot of doors. So
Okay.
you need
Like
to build that credit
for
history.
example, if we have some people watching and they don't know about that, can you just describe quickly?
Yeah, so the credit score essentially depicts your ability to pay your bills on time and that you're a reliable payer. And you need your credit score to borrow money. You need your credit score to rent a place. You need your credit score to buy a place. So any financial transaction that you're going to do, someone will pull your credit score.
Yeah.
And if
Like a
that credit
trust.
score is not good, then you're going to be declined.
Yeah. At your trust level, basically.
It's your banking trust level.
Yeah. Okay. Understand. Thank you for explaining that quickly. Um, let's go back. Okay, you have lived in Canada before as a student, and now you're coming with your two suitcase and ready to work. So what was the reality check between what you have imagined and how things happen? Was it easy to start that new life?
I wouldn't say it was easy. Definitely, life as a student was easier. My parents paid for my room. I didn't really have to make money. I had to focus on my studies, make sure I successfully run through my semester there at U of T. Um, kind of all expenses paid by France without really having to think too much about it. New reality, I definitely had money set aside when I came in with my two suitcases. I had worked for a few years. I knew I wasn't necessarily going to find a job right away, but I had a lot of pressure on my shoulders to make it work or take a trip back to France. So that was kind of the options at the time. Um, Definitely took some energy to figure things out. Like, how do I rent a place here? What do I need to have in place? My parents are not here. So kind of going back to the fact that you don't know the rules and you need to figure them out as you go. That took effort. And then finding the first job wasn't easy because, like I said, you need your first Canadian experience. It doesn't matter what it is, but you need that. So working in the bakery kind of helped me figure out some of the cultural gaps as well. Sorry, because you meet a lot of people. The owners were from Belgium. They explained a few things, and then I moved to a different job. Very new learnings once you work for a corporation. So I moved from these quote unquote small jobs to a real job within a bank. Very different reality. Now you work within a bank, you work with people from all over the world. They have expectations of you that are the same as people that have been there 10 years, 20 years, or ever. So you need to constantly culturally adapt to what you're seeing. But it's the fun part of this endeavor, right?
Yes, exactly. So if I put that into context, you get a business school diploma, you work 4 years at a certain level in France, and then you go back, and then you go back to Canada, and there is the humility that you show and say,
Yeah.
okay, I need to work in a bakery first, like to really change, like not coming and say, I was a manager at this level, I want the same. It was like, okay, I accept. I'm gonna learn on the way.
Yes, there's definitely a step back when you move. And I think for my experience, it's been easier because I moved early on kind of in my career, but it was definitely a step back. Like in France, I had huge responsibilities, and moving back to selling croissants was definitely a bit of a move, a gutsy move.
But how do you
But
leave that emotionally? How do you frame it in your mind? Like,
I
to,
think in my mind, I just needed a job to show the world that I could survive was my idea of moving abroad, right? I wanted to be able to pay my bills. I wanted to be able to pay my rent. So it was okay. I didn't do it for years on end. I was still looking for another job, and I think I would have to go back. But I think this transition period lasted about 6 months. So we're not talking years. We're talking, taking the time to adjust, figure out your bearings, figure out how to write that Canadian resume, send it broadly, and find a
yeah.
job.
And actually, that time also give you a great opportunity to learn about the culture, learn how things works, and get a feeling of how is the job market, and like getting ready at the end of the day to really start your career.
Yeah, I think for me, it's different if you come with a job and you're immersed right away. I didn't come with a job, I came without. So I think 6 months is probably shorter than I expected at the time. So it wasn't so bad. It does give you time to adjust. And then once you have your foot in the door, then you're considered Canadian. And
Yeah.
then your career is just as good or as bad as anybody else's career locally.
Yes. So today, so how many years totally you're there?
We'll reach 20 years.
Yeah, 20. Um, so I guess you're feeling like super settled. This is home.
That was an interesting question. I reflected on that a little bit. I don't know if I feel settled. I feel Canadian.
You feel Canadian.
So
What's the
and for me, it's a
difference?
little bit different.
Yeah, what's the difference? Tell me more.
In my mind, it's, I feel very Canadian and very attached to the culture here. Love the culture here. But settled to me means that I'll live here forever. And that's probably not the case. So
Okay.
I'm not settled in the sense that this is home, this is my forever home, but I am settled in the culture.
Okay. Got it. Talking about culture, how do you experience cultural differences in your daily life? I mean, maybe after 20 years, if everything feels super normal, but at the beginning, um, what was the challenges you faced with the cultural differences?
I don't think it was necessarily a challenge, but Toronto specifically is extremely multicultural. So you work with people from all over. And it's just understanding that they have a different social background and they react to situations differently. And that is super rich for an organization, regardless of the organization you work for. I worked with people from Iran, I worked with people from Bangladesh, I worked with people from India, I worked with Americans a lot. So, and everything is different, and a lot of the interactions you get are tainted by where people come from. So I see it more as a enrichment of my professional career that I would have probably not had I stayed in the center of France. Um, I don't necessarily see it as a challenge. It becomes a bit of a challenge in a management position when you need to manage people in a Canadian context, knowing that they have cultural baggage that is different.
Yes.
So in that context, I have faced challenges in the last few years where managing performance for someone that is Moroccan is probably a different exercise than managing performance for someone that is from Asia. So two very different approaches to management, essentially.
Okay. How did you figure things out?
I asked questions. I try to be, and we had training. So when I worked for a large bank here, there was a lot of cultural training. So that's one way. And the other way is just to always try to not have any preconceived ideas. So it's very much a humbling moment where you have to always go back and say, no, I'm gonna have a fresh perspective on this, and I'm gonna let them explain where they come from.
Mm.
But it's always a challenge
Yeah, because it requires effort to
because
pause,
it
clean
requires
your
effort.
head, clean your head and say, okay, now I'm starting fresh and I trying to really understand what they're trying to tell me. And
And,
that's
and you need to relate to the culture, right? We from France, I think, come with a culture of performance and trying to always be the best at what we do. And we're drilled with that, you can do better mentality. But people that are from other countries are not coming with that mentality. And you, as a leader, often expect people to come with that baggage. For me, we've been drilled, and especially through business school, you can do better, you can achieve great things, don't disappoint anybody along the way. So we came with kind of that mentality where other people, especially in Canada, a job is a job, and people have a very different relationship with their job. They don't work to succeed, they work because everybody needs to work to pay their bills. So in a way, a lot of people have a healthier relationship to work. And we need to agree that, if they do minimal effort, maybe that is how they feel they're achieving enough, which
okay.
for me was a little hard to conceive sometimes. And I have a tendency to push and say, well, but you could do better. Why don't you do better? Well, it's cultural. Sometimes they're not interested, and
Yeah.
it's okay.
And it's okay.
And
Yes,
it's okay.
work-life balance in Canada is really important. That's what I heard.
Hmm. It is.
Yeah. Interesting perspective. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Looking back on your experience of 20 years, is there anything you would have done differently?
I think the only thing I would have done differently is not necessarily work related, but I would have settled, to your point, sooner. So sorry, when I moved, I always had that feeling that maybe I was going to be here for 2 years, then 5 years, then 10 years. So I never really invested in real estate in the cities that I lived in, thinking this move was always temporary. And now 20 years later, it's not all that temporary. So I would have settled more in the sense that I would have bought a home sooner. Um, and that doesn't necessarily mean settling. And I think that's the difference. You can invest in the country that you're in without, you know, being a forever knot that you'll never be able to untie. That would have been a very different trajectory had I bought a house in Toronto.
Yeah. And it's also, we always think, oh, we're going to stay 2 years, 3 years. And then you have opportunities coming all the time. And at the end, you ended up staying a longer time. So, being 20 years, you've been working and living in a multicultural environment. How does those learnings influence your decision today as a mother, as a manager, as a woman? How does that impact you today?
I think I'll go by roles, I guess, as a mother. It is showing my daughter that you can do anything you kind of decide you want to pursue. So she obviously wasn't born when I moved with two suitcases, but she knows that that was kind of the journey She was there when I moved from Toronto to Montreal, and that was another reboot kind of the situation. So she knows it's possible, and she knows you can succeed, and she knows you can pretty much achieve whatever you set your mind to. So I think that's kind of an empowering moment or skill that she has. Like, she doesn't doubt today. I think if you were to ask her that this is possible, she could move to China tomorrow and make it work. So I don't think there's that fear that we had of maybe taking that leap. What was the second role as the
As a
manager?
manager.
As a manager, I think it's really that cultural awareness that I try to bring with me everywhere I go. And if I were to move back to Europe, that's something I would bring with me. That's definitely the biggest learning. Taking that into account, it's not an excuse because you can't say, you know, I'm from here, therefore this is how it's going to go. But it is definitely kind of one more thing you have to have in your head as a manager to be a good leader is that you can't overwrite where people come from. That's part of their baggage, and you have to take that into account, and you have to leverage it as a strength and not as a weakness. You don't want people from a team to all be the same. That's not what makes a great team. So I think having that ability to know the I don't claim to know the cultural differences. I know they're different, and every time I face a new culture, there's a learning curve. But I think that is what you bring to a diverse team, and that's all the richness of your team. And then as a woman, I think it's similar to what I do as a mother. It's just having that confidence now that I could move again and that it would be okay. I would be resourceful enough to find the help that I need and find and craft a path for myself.
So to wrap up, I'm asking this question to everyone. Imagine your best friend is moving to Canada next month. What are your top 3 pieces of advice?
Top 3, I would say 1, make sure you have the right to live and work in Canada. Over the years, I've had a lot of people approach me and say, oh, I want to move. I'm coming next month. So I'm like, okay, well, that's good. But are you coming as a tourist or are you coming to live? And if you're coming to live, and I think that's universally true, you need to research what kind of paperwork you need to be eligible to live and work in the country. So I think that's number 1. Number 2, I'd say be curious because nothing will trump that. And be curious, be aware of your surroundings and learn. Like you don't come here, and that's probably especially true of French people who have a tendency to feel like they know more than the local people sometimes here, and that's why they don't love us that much. You don't know it all. You have to learn. You have to learn the culture that you're in. So be curious. And 3, I'd say, and things are different now than 20 years ago, but right now there are a lot of resources available. You can read. You can read online a lot of tips, a lot of tricks, a lot of how to get started. I would definitely do some research because you want to be ready to go if you're moving to live and not as a tourist. You want to have as much information in your back pocket as possible. So do your research would be my 3rd tip.
Yeah, thank you. I heard before we were saying, oh, it's so easy to go and work in Canada. They welcome everyone. Is it still true?
As we speak today, March 2025, not so true. It's still very feasible compared to other countries, but they are kind of cutting down on immigration for all sorts of good and bad reasons. But right now, there is a little bit less immigration coming in. So it's only applies, and Canada always has a select immigration. So they pick who has the right to immigrate here, depending on what trade you're in. So there are less trades that are open to immigration, but you could still immigrate through studies. You could still immigrate through select trades that are still welcome. So it is still very much a welcoming country, but less so than 6 months ago, let's say.
Okay, understand. Okay, thank you so much, Emily, for
Thank
sharing
you for having me.
with me. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. And to our listeners, we hope you found this conversation inspiring and that you find value in what Émilie has shared with us today and all these insights. Don't forget to register to our live Q&A and follow us on our LinkedIn page. All the links are in the description below. Thank you and see you soon for the next episode.